Good morning, everyone. I am Mark Donnelly. I'm your 2025 LIBOR president, and we are so excited for today's presentation. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce our fantastic guest speaker. James Swiggins serves as the co-CEO of Raise. He is also the co-CEO of Next Home and has been in real estate franchise business since 2006. James is third generation in the real estate space. His grandfather started a brokerage in 1967. Prior to franchising, James co-founded the REO, developer of groundbreaking enterprise-level internet applications for agents and brokers. VREO pioneered biometric signature software for paperless transactions and garnered numerous industry accolades, including the coveted Inman Innovator Award for breakthrough technologies. Very impressive. James speaks regularly at industry events and is a frequent media expert on real estate. He has been featured as a RISMedia newsmaker and on the Swanepoel Power 200 list. Franchise Business Review recognized him as the leader of the #1 real estate franchise and #1 across industries in owner satisfaction for 3 years in a row. James is also co-host of the popular Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Also, you're very lucky that you can hear and see James in person at LIBOR's education conference on June 11th as our keynote presenter on the new normal, future of real estate. For now, I welcome LIBOR's friend and turn it over to James Swiggins. James?
Thank you, Mark. Truly appreciate the introduction. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon for all of you over there. Quick preface, I am on my first day of feeling better after having the flu all week. I still look very pale, but I'm at least feeling a lot better than I did yesterday. So you're getting a better version of me today. I've got an hour with you, and I certainly have a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to be going through a lot of information today, really related around the industry. There's certainly no shortage of news headlines on a daily basis. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to cover some continued legal risks that everybody needs to be aware of in this post-settlement world. There's still a lot of things that people are they're doing that they shouldn't be doing that are going to get you in trouble. So I'm going to cover a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the opportunities that are ahead. There certainly feels like there's a lot of threats. I'll cover a few of those, but there is a lot of bright spots, and I want to make sure that everyone's really paying attention to where we are as an industry, timing, space, the market, etc. And then I'm going to help you guys look at how to curate a really great buyer and seller experience to win more deals and get the compensation that you feel you deserve to be paid. So with that being said, I'm going to get my keynote up and going. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A, please. I have that window up and we'll be answering those as we go. Again, put it in the Q&A. You can see that down on your little toolbar with Zoom. Real quick, since I am going to be covering some things that are about compensation, we do not talk about specific numbers. It's an antitrust violation. So just so everybody hears this, you should not discuss your fees or commissions with other brokers, as it's a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Also, do not put any of that in the Q&A. If you have a specific question around things, you can generalize it, but do not get specific because everybody's independent. All right, last 24 months. What can I say? It's been an interesting time in the business. I've been in real estate literally my entire life. As Mark mentioned, my grandfather started his company in 1967. Both my parents were brokers, and I have managed to be in this business in one side or the other. There has been nonstop headlines about our industry, most of which have not been very positive. I feel very strongly about the fact that we need to be speaking up more. We need to be doing a better job. That means agents and brokers doing a better job of explaining what we do. But there are a lot of continued legal risks that we still are facing. We're not even out of the weeds yet here. I think sometimes people think that this whole thing is done. And, if you're following the headlines, you saw Michael Ketchmark is not appropriately throwing his own threats around to the industry again. But we're really, in my opinion, the first inning of litigation. So I want to go through a few of these things to make sure you understand where we are in time and space. The sell side cases that you saw, Burnett Sitzer and Gibson, I was a named defendant as my company settled along with all of the others. Those sell side cases are coming to a close under $1 billion settlement, which will end up being about 1.3 billion when it's all said and done. Of course, the lawyers managed to grab a third of that, so you all can form your own opinions on their motive for doing this. But the ones that people aren't talking about is the buy side cases. There's some buyer side cases. Essentially, buyers are claiming that they were harmed. This theory that agents increased the price of the house by adding their compensation into it, thereby causing the buyer to be harmed and having to pay for that. These cases are moving through the courts in the Northern District of Illinois. They're not federal anymore, they're state cases, but there are certainly a lot of these cases that are being thrown around, as well as copycat cases. So there's a whole other situation out there that no one's really talking about that are moving through the courts still. So pay attention to that. The one that I'm mostly concerned about, I think this is a big problem that our industry is moving itself towards because it doesn't seem to understand this, is private listings. I know this is a touchy subject, really shouldn't be. There's already been a lawsuit that occurred in Florida where a seller who kept their property off the MLS because the agent had talked about being able to do it privately and get them the same price, afterwards felt that they didn't get the best price when they were doing comparables. They felt that the agent didn't do them their best service possible, sued the brokerage and the agent, and it ended up settling because guess what? In the United States, the legal system in this country is so backwards that you can sue anybody for anything. And the only way to get out of it is to hire a lawyer to defend you. And those costs are going to be so extreme that settlement is always cheaper than going to trial. Not almost always, but pretty much that. And so the point here is this is a ticking time bomb of what's coming. You're seeing this happen all over the US where these private exclusives are becoming a big thing. Not to mention there's fair housing issues that are going to arise from this. But you are going to see litigation come, and I would encourage every broker and agent to very seriously think about the disclosures that you're doing if you're going to do private exclusives, to make sure the seller understands what they are actually agreeing to do, that it will not be on Zillow, that it will not be on public portals. This is a ticking time bomb of stuff that you're going to see happening, and I happen to know the antitrust litigators and the class action litigators are circling around this practice, so watch that. Number 3, class action for cooperative compensation. This still tends to be a serious issue around the US. There are a lot of companies that are not doing cooperative compensation any further because it doesn't make any logical sense. I'm going to talk about that. To be clear, cooperative compensation, where you are collecting compensation and you are sharing a portion of that with the buyer brokerage. That's what I'm referring to. This is a huge issue. A lot of states have fixed it by not doing it any further. So in California, for example, there is no cooperative compensation in the forms. It's always seller direct payment, meaning the seller is paying the seller's agent and the seller is paying the buyer's brokerage. So it's going directly from the seller. I'm going to cover this really quickly so you understand what I'm talking about here. Post August 17th, this is the problem that nobody seems to grasp fully, is that if I asked all of you, is the fee that the buyer's agent that they're going to charge their buyer going to be different by agent? Almost all of you will say yes. So knowing that, why would you ever advertise what your seller is willing to pay, knowing that the fee might be actually lower of what the buyer's agent is going to be compensated by the buyer? Meaning you might be advertising a rate that you're willing to pay that is larger than what the buyer's agent actually needed to be paid on the other side. That essentially could be harming your seller in paying too much when they don't need to. So you really need to think about this, and I'm going to show you the best practice why EXP doesn't do it, I don't do it, Baird & Warner doesn't do it. All these big brokerages are moving away from this because there's a massive liability. It also can be an issue if your forms are set up in such a way, which I've seen in several states, where cooperative compensation isn't clearly identified, that if the seller does do a direct payment to the buyer brokerage, the fee that the listing agent charged is reduced on that amount. I've seen a state in the US where the listing agent keeps that entire amount and the seller pays the buyer brokerage the additional fee, again harming the seller in that particular process. It's also less competitive. I'm going to give you a study here real quick I want to show you. I think it's really interesting to look at. This is a company in Southern California that stopped doing cooperative compensation in January prior to the settlement. And they tracked how this went down. So what he did was he told the seller, look, here's the deal. We're not going to offer any compensation in advance of an offer. So we're not going to tell anybody what we're willing to pay. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you should expect almost every offer that's coming in to have a request to pay buyer's agent compensation, because candidly, most buyers can't afford to pay their agent. The housing costs have gone up so much. You benefited from massive appreciation rates. Just know this is going to be part of the conversation. And whether you choose to pay it or not is your choice, but understand it's going to be probably part of the deal terms. So here's 6 transactions that occurred over the course of 1 year, where again, the buyer's agent is calling the listing agent saying, is your seller offering compensation? And his answer is, my seller is willing to entertain any and all requests. Just put it in the offer. Sale number 1, they received 12 offers. Compensation requests ranged from 2 to 3%. So out of the 12 offers, compensation on all of these ranged from 2 to 3%. Seller ended up paying 2.5. That was requested to get the deal done. Sale number 2, 13 offers received. Compensation request was 0 to 2.5. And the lack of compensation gave one offer a $40,000 net value to the seller. So they accepted that. Really important thing to consider right there. What you're looking at here is an example of why you don't want to be advertising publicly what your seller is willing to do. Because if you had done that in this scenario and the agent was smart enough, they would have asked for some type of concession, and essentially the seller could have been harmed out of that money. You let the buyer's agent request what they need. You look at all of the offers as a listing agent, and then you determine with net sheets what is in the best interest of the seller or what the seller is looking for out of the deal terms. So sale 3, again, 1 offer received, compensation was 2.5. It was requested, they paid it. Sale 4, 6 offers received, compensation requested of 1.75 to 2.5. Seller paid 2.25. Sale 4, again, you can see the numbers, and then sale 6. Here's the point I want to make out of this. Number 1 is the fees that the seller paid ranged, and they weren't always the lowest. Number 2, the seller in almost every single scenario minus one of them, because of the offer, they paid compensation because they wanted to sell their house. And then number 3, as you saw here, had the seller been advertising compensation in advance of an offer, they would have been harmed. This practice is really bad and should stop. This is literally what the sellers and the class action lawyers are going to use for their next class action litigation when they go to this. So this is really good to know. I'm glad to know, by the way, somebody just put this in here, that the forms and LIBOR released in July do not include cooperative compensation. Smart move. But I want everybody to know this, because these are the threats and headlines that you guys are going to see coming up. All right, we already talked about this then. Reroute the money. You're not doing cooperative compensation, which is great. So you can do a seller direct payment, or you can do a concession. This is what I'm trying to get everybody else across the US to understand. It's not that complicated. If your seller still wants to offer compensation, they have every right to do it. If they want to say, I want to offer X, let them do that. Just make sure that when you do, you've got a CYA form that says it was your idea, not mine. And then obviously have the seller do a direct payment going forward. All right, moving fast is really fast. I want to go through a few things. I'm going to get into the next section here. You cannot do these things. This is really important for everybody to understand. This is Michael Ketchmark, who you all know. His interpretation of the settlement agreement. You cannot modify a buyer representation agreement to receive additional compensation. He's correct, except for one area, and that is really only this. If the terms of what you agreed to with the buyer under your buyer rep agreement need to be materially changed, in other words, let's say you agreed to do, I'm making this up, but 100 hours worth of work, and the buyer's requesting you to do an additional 100 hours worth of work, that's a material change that you could go and request a change to your agreement. Those are absolutely things that you could modify the buyer rep. But what you can't do is modify the buyer rep just because the seller is offering more compensation. Literally violates the settlement agreement. And you do not want to be doing things that are going to give these lawyers any grounds to come after you. Seller paid or builder bonuses. Big no-no. Again, you can't do that. That's literally, if you can make that change, then you are opening yourself up to steering claims, because then you're pushing a client into a specific property because compensation. That would literally be, by the way, Exhibit A in the lawsuit. Oh, we modified the buyer rep, and now they're getting a $50,000 bonus from the builder. Oh, wow, the buyer felt harmed in the process. You're screwed in court. So you cannot do that. Moving forward, towing agreements supplemented with buyer brokerage agreements. I don't even know why we have towing agreements. Just use your buyer rep. Make it 1 house, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, exclusive, non-exclusive. Just get really good with that and just make the terms specific towards what the buyer needs in that particular case and what you're comfortable with. Ranges of compensation, can't do that either. Final thing is property-specific compensation agreement entered into after compensation is known. The whole reason, I want to make sure everybody gets this, I'm going to move forward. The whole reason that you're signing a buyer rep agreement in advance of seeing any houses or showing any houses is to set your services and your fee prior to knowing what the compensation is or is not being offered on a home. That's literally the reason why this was set up this way. I know this because I've spoken to these lawyers and I've also spoken to NAR. The point of it is to set your fee and services in advance so that it doesn't matter what the seller is offering. Your buyer has agreed to pay you that money, and or you've agreed to make it part of the deal terms in any offer that you write. If you can modify these things, then what's the point of having them? So very, very specific, important point to do. Now, NAR has come out and basically has said the same thing in this process. So you can only be paid as much as what you and your client agreed to. Compensation has to be specific and not open-ended. You can't modify them just to receive additional compensation. So this is literally what NAR is saying. The only difference is you can modify the buyer rep if you're materially changing the terms, which I agree with, although I will tell you be very careful with that. If it's not material enough, then that becomes subjective and you can run into an issue. So, all right, we got some questions here. I'm just going to take them real fast. The seller in deal number 2 worked for free. The seller in deal number 2 worked for free. No, the seller essentially didn't pay compensation to the buyer brokerage. So the seller netted $40,000 more by not having to pay out that additional amount. So better understand what you suggest is that the seller not offer compensation up front. Seller agent should advise buyer agent that seller is willing to entertain any. That's exactly what I'm saying. By the way, to be clear, so you understand this, that's literally what my 6,000 people do. That's what EXP does. You're not saying the seller isn't willing to pay compensation. You're simply stating, put whatever you need, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer and buyer's agent, into the agreement, and then we'll entertain it. So you're getting, let's say, 5 offers. You're going to look at all the deal terms, and what your job is, obviously, is to net the seller in 99% of the time the highest price possible. So what you should be doing is let them put their cards on the table, tell you what they need, and then you can decide how you want to respond. Accept one of them, counter all of them, completely up to you. It is best practice, and inevitably, by the way, I've been tracking this, it ends up making the seller benefit more. Not in all cases, but I have many, many examples where the seller would have been harmed if you had been telling people what your seller was willing to do. So that's absolutely the process. Sorry, the buyer agent worked for free. No, not in that particular case. In this particular case, I don't know the specific terms, by the way, Joe, but my assumption is the buyer agreed to pay the buyer's agent separately from the transaction. So that's completely a part of the negotiation. Let me go a little further. If you talk to your buyer and you sign a buyer rep and you're basically going through this process of saying, look, this is what we agreed to. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Okay, great. Can you afford to pay this fee on your own, or do you need to make it part of the offer process and request the seller to pay my fee? Just ask them the question. The buyer's going to go, I can't afford to pay you. Great. Then understand we're going to make it part of the deal term. and we're going to request the seller to do it. Typically, it's very common this will work, but there could be a chance the seller doesn't want to pay it. We'll have to figure out our process going forward. You just need to be upfront with them about it. But remember what I showed you there. And to be clear, since we've been doing this now for 8 months, like 98% of the time, the seller wants to do what? Sell their house. They're going to figure out a way to do that. You just need to negotiate. So, all right, we got another question here, and then I'm going to go back. Can you repeat what I need to say as a listing agent when a buyer's agent is asking if the seller is paying compensation? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer's agent, our seller is willing to entertain any and all requests that you need to put a deal together. Just put those requests in the offer. If compensation needs to be part of that, put it in the offer, and my seller will entertain it. We'll get back to you with what our response will be. You're not saying no, you're just saying put what you need in there. Really important part, by the way, super important to hear this. Why this is important for your seller is because that buyer's agent cannot request more compensation than what they agreed to in that buyer rep. So you're again putting that pressure back on the other side. Can you confirm it is illegal to offer an amount or percentage back to a buyer or seller if they decide to hire the agent making the offer? Can you confirm if it's illegal to offer an amount or percentage back to a buyer? I can't confirm that. You'll need to ask counsel on that. And I don't know the laws in the state of New York, so you need to get a little bit more, or New Jersey, you need to get a little bit more answers on that. So, all right, let's continue forward here. I got a lot of stuff to cover. Threats and opportunities. Here's what's happening in the market today. You got a lot of bad PR. You've got companies and professors writing things about our industry that are saying that agents are useless and they're irrelevant. Couldn't completely disagree more, and this professor seems to be highly uneducated. You do see new products coming out like Shay, buy a house without a realtor, save thousands. You got Homa, same thing. Buy a home without a realtor, save a bunch of money. And then we all saw the news of Rocket and Redfin combination this week. In my opinion, I think this is a big deal. Not necessarily because I'm concerned about Rocket or Redfin, but I am concerned about essentially the finance sector wanting to get into residential real estate. And what's interesting about this move is the fact that they're getting top of funnel. What I mean by that is they bought a real estate portal that gets 50 million unique visitors a month. And for context, Zillow's 200, so it's not a small number. And their entire goal, which they put in their investor deck, is very clear. The median transaction costs in the United States for an average price home of roughly $430,000 is 40 grand, and they want to reduce it to 20. How are they going to do that? They're going to bundle. They're going to stick everything together. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if you buy through us and you use our loan product and our title product and all of these things, then we'll reduce the cost. You'll get a savings in that process. I could see Rocket even going to the extent of saying, look, we'll help you buy a house for, a third of what other agents are charging you to do it. If you use our loan company, et cetera. Now, remember, there's a way they can get around this. They're not a bank, first of all, which they don't have to follow the same RESPA rules. And number two is Redfin agents are employees. When you're an employee of a company, it is different than when you are not. And if you look at the RESPA language, as an employee, there's nothing stopping them from bundling multiple services in their offering. So this is a very interesting move that I think we need to pay attention to. Why this is important, we got to get really good at articulating our value. Like, if you want to compete and still charge the higher rate that will eventually be put pressure on, then you need to be very good at explaining why someone needs to pay you those fees. That's literally the premise of everything I'm going to go through very quickly here over the next 40 minutes. 89% of consumers, by the way, this is where I'm going to pick you up, used a realtor in 2024. That's the second highest percentage we've seen in history. By the way, for context, in 2001, use of a realtor on the buy side was 69% of the time. Zillow wasn't even formed until 2005. So all this tech and all this information was going to remove the realtor, and yet here we are at one of the highest usage rates ever. Reasons are, in my opinion, quite simple. You look at where we are today in America. In 1960, dual income households was 30%. Today it's 60. Why is that an important number? Mom and dad both wake up, and speak for myself, we have careers, we've got kids. We don't think about just wanting to sell a house on our own or doing all this process on our own. We want to figure out to work with somebody who can help us. And so we need guidance. We need expertise, somebody to make this easier. So we're willing to pay a premium in the United States for service. I'm going to go through this deeper. 2024, 6% of FSBOs was only 6% for FSBO. By the way, in 2023, it was 7% were FSBO. That number's coming down. It's not going up. So again, people still want help in this particular process. You can go to WebMD and diagnose your own illness. 90% of the time it's wrong. That's why you still call a doctor. So some stats I think that are important. 51% of customers say that customer service is more important than price. 70% of customers say that a convenient experience is more important than price. And 80% of customers are willing to go out of their way to do business with a company that offers better customer service. RingCentral did the study, one of the best companies in the US, massive firm. What is this basically telling us? People are willing to pay a premium for service, and they're willing to pay a premium for convenience. If you can hit those two markers really well with your customer, they'll pay you your fee. They just need to be able to see the value. They need to see service, and they need to see convenience in that particular process. Some stats that are interesting that were done last year that I think are very, very relevant. Generally speaking, did you find the help of an agent more valuable when buying or selling? Almost half of people said on both sides. I thought this would be much more skewed towards the sell side than the buy side. So again, they want buyer representation in this process. Which of these statements do you agree with more? 24% says it isn't necessary to hire a real estate agent to help you buy a home, blah, blah, blah. But more importantly, 76% said it is. So they're saying that they want help in this particular process. And then finally, this stat was really important to me. 14% want to pay hourly. I find this to be even funny because I don't think they actually do. It's like, yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm going to send you a bill every month for all of my time. I actually hope we did hourly because I think you'd all make way more money. 20% said a flat fee, and a majority of people still want to be paid. I want to pay a contingency fee, really important here. They want to pay you once they actually do a deal. They don't want to pay you until they do. And I think it's really important that we use the right language, that Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you pay me a contingency fee when and if we buy a house. So if you decide you didn't want to after 6 months, all this work I'm going to do, it goes unpaid. And I'm not saying I'm not unhappy with it, but what I do is I get paid a contingency fee. That's part of the process. Like, get really confident in that, because I think we don't do a good enough job of explaining why that's a benefit to buyers and sellers. Now, what I want to do here is go through and give you some really cool stuff to think about on how to curate your own buyer experience. This is something that we teach in our own organization. You're welcome to use all of this as well. It's a foolproof plan. If you want to charge the commission rate or compensation rate that you think you're worth, follow this plan and you're going to get it every time. So first, you need to do some due diligence. You need to know what the hell your buyers want. So 8 things buyers want most from real estate agents. Let's go through it. Because you got to know what they're looking for in order to curate a plan that satisfies what they want. So they want help finding the right home. They want you to help negotiate the terms. They want to help you with negotiations on price, paperwork. They want you to help find comparable homes, a buyer that can afford it, or buyer they can afford, right? They want to help you arrange financing, and they want help with neighborhood or area information. Why is this important to you? You're like, yes, James, I know all of that. Well, okay. How well do you cover all of this in your buyer consult? Are you even doing a buyer consult? Are you sitting down and explaining what these things are? Addressing, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, these are the 8 things that most buyers want. I want to address with you how I cover all of this when working with me directly. Do not make assumptions that they are going to figure this out on their own. You need to curate that experience with them. This is your playbook. The second part of your playbook is the things that they want in the home search process. Again, NAR does a great job of giving you this intel. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I know that these are the things that you're going to want in the experience. Why I'm going to talk about it is I'm going to show you how I actually provide this. So, you're going to be looking for professional photos. You're going to want detailed information about the properties. You're going to look for floor plans, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Most agents on the listing side don't do their job correctly and provide a floor plans. We're going to talk about how I can solve that for you. Detailed information on sold properties. You're going to want neighborhood info. You're going to want a walkthrough, contract status. You're going to want to do an interactive map search, videos, upcoming open houses, and virtual open houses. This is the standard things the buyers want in a search experience. So what I want to do now is curate that for you. First, this is what you got to do, everybody. You got to treat your buyer the same way you treat your seller. So ask a lot of questions. Do a consult. Do a lot of listening. Don't do a lot of talking. Have them tell you what they're looking for, identify their needs, relate to them, get down on their level. have a great presentation. I recommend one of these three companies. You can use whatever one you want. These are just three I'm aware of. But build a really beautiful buyer presentation that's digital and go through it with them. Give them leave behind material so they can read everything that you talked about, because they're only going to remember 10% of what you tell them. Talk about your buyer rep agreement, how compensation needs to be paid. I mentioned this earlier. Are they going to pay it, or do they need the seller to pay it? Make sure you have that consult up front so they understand what that means, and get really good at articulating your value. We're going to talk about that a lot. So what buyers want in the home search process, what I include. Ready? Everybody should be doing this. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're going to want professional photos. If the listing agent didn't do their job correctly, you let me know. I'll go out there and I'll get photos for you of the property. Remember, everything I'm going to go through right now is all about increasing your value so that you can charge the compensation that you're worth. Remember, you're going to be competing against companies that are going to try to devalue what you offer. You need to increase value. 96% of buyers are going to want information on homes for sale. I use the MLS like anybody else, but I also have this really cool product called realreports.ai. It's like the Carfax for the house. So every house you're interested in writing an offer on, I'm going to give you the Real Reports, a report on it. By the way, you guys can go sign up for this. I'm not endorsed by them. I'm just giving you products that I'm familiar with. Floor plans. Unfortunately, 10% of listings have a floor plan. I have a product called Cubicasa. It's an amazing product. If you have a house you want to write an offer on, you're really considering, let me know. I'll go create the floor plan for you. By the way, it takes 5 minutes to do. You literally use your phone, walk through the property. I don't even know how this technology works, but it will literally create a floor plan for you in 24 hours. It's incredible. So again, by the way, another comment, it's free. Go download it. There's no excuse not to use it. A great service you're adding. Sold properties. RPR's got incredible data. I would include that in addition to obviously data that you've got on the MLS. Neighborhood information. I have this really, really cool system called locallogic.co. I'm going to give you more information on a neighborhood than you can find anywhere on the internet. So you like a neighborhood? Let me know. I'm going to give you more information on that as well. Virtual tours and 3D walkthroughs. You have a property you're really interested in? I can go do a 3D walkthrough for you. Let me know if you want that service. Totally available for you. Pending sales and contracts that use the MLS. My website has interactive map search. I'll create a property video for you with my phone if you'd like. Again, the service I can provide. My MLS has open houses. And then if you want to do a virtual walkthrough, let me know. We'll set a date and time and I'll do a FaceTime with you. What am I doing here, folks? I'm increasing my value. Instead of just, I'm a professional, I've been doing this a long time, I got a Rolodex of people. Get rid of that crap. Like, that's part of it. But you should be now offering products and services in your experience to differentiate yourself from other agents, but increase your value because people are willing to pay a premium for service and convenience. All the things I just did here were about service and convenience. Super important part to talk about. Now, finally, this is how I differentiate myself versus other agents. I also offer things that other buyers agents don't offer. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is where I get really unique. So you're going to see a lot of homes that are just really not well decorated, and it's hard to see the value of that property. So I have this really cool product called Style Dot. So we'll upload the home photos from the MLS. We'll take this individual listing that we're looking at, and we're going to go, what could it look like? What could it look like if we painted it or changed the furniture out or gave it a different look? Through AI, by the way, you can do that today. Really cool product and make that part of my service offering. We're also going to do the same thing and be able to tell you through Revive. Really cool technology. Takes the photos of the listing. It looks at it through machine learning and AI. I'm explaining it to you, but it can look at it and go, roughly $40,000 worth of work might be able to create $100,000 worth of new equity on this particular home. So you should be thinking about how you can show the up-leg value on the property. We're going to talk about raise. You're going to look at utility services, again, an extra value. I'm going to help you change all your utilities. We're going to get you moved. I've got this really cool product called Move Concierge. I provide a home warranty on the home for the first year in which you purchase it. I'm going to talk about how to monetize that in a second. There's also a really cool home maintenance app I'm going to give you. When you move into the house, if you can't figure out how to use the thermostat or you got a problem, it's a really cool product called Front Door. You open up the app, a live technician shows up via video. You turn the phone around and they'll walk you through and teach you how to use all the appliances and everything inside your home. Really cool piece. And then finally, we're going to maintain this property through a product called homeowner.ai. So over the next 9 to 13 years, you'll own it. It's going to tell you when you need to get your air filters changed, when you need to service your appliances. All of these things will be garnered for you. Again, I'm increasing my value with the buyer. Finally, I would encourage you to think about this. Levels of service. So again, Premier, Platinum. Your Premier service is essentially like, this is what I do as a standard. Platinum service is I offer all these additional things on top. There's no reason you can't monetize this, that you can't charge a higher fee and you're offering more. I'm not saying everybody will do this, but pretty much I guarantee you anybody who pays to stay at the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons is willing to pay a premium for service and convenience. There are going to be a segment of your clientele who would absolutely love to have you take care of everything for them and would pay you to do that. These are just ideas I threw out. You can come up with your own lists, but you should be rethinking about how you approach this. We can all agree an investor client doesn't need as much handholding as a first-time home buyer. And again, you may have a client who's bought lots of houses and just wants to wash their hands of it, and they'll pay you a premium. So rethink that as well at the same time. All right, let's go to sell side. We'll knock through this quickly, and then we'll get into raise and talk about that. I'll answer some questions here in just a second. So again, the 8 things the sellers are looking for most from real estate agents. Again, it's just your consult with them. They want to obviously help in marketing the house. They want to price it competitively. They want to sell it within a specific time frame. Is there ways it needs to be fixed up? They want you to help them find a buyer. They want negotiations and dealing work, paperwork, inspections, and then, of course, see homes available to purchase. That's what they're looking for. Again, talk to them about that. This is, we know what most sellers are looking for. What are you looking for? Ask lots of questions in that process. Continuing forward, the 12 ways your competitors market homes for sale. By the way, I love this chart. This is like gold for me as like a super analytical person. If you want to know what your competition's doing, NAR does the work for you. So this is, and this numbers are horrible in my opinion, but this is literally the most common ways that homes are marketed for sale across the US. 86% use the multiple listing service. 86% are on third-party portals, which makes sense because they get their data from the MLS. 61% do a yard sign. I'm like, what? 58% of only are doing open houses. That's crazy to me. Real estate agent website, 46%. Real estate company website, social media at 22%. Like, I'm like, what planet are we on right now? Virtual tours, walkthroughs, direct mail, virtual open houses, and the newspaper magazine. All right, look. If this is the percentage of what they're doing and you want to get a seller to work with you, this is the pitch. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is the most common ways that agents market homes for sale. By the way, they're going to charge you somewhat varying rates on things and everybody's different. But what I want you to understand, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is that more exposure means potentially more offers, which means more competitive opportunity to make a higher sales price. Like we can sell it for more. We want to get more people looking at it, more offers in, and then we can figure out how to bump them up and get you the best price possible. So the why I'm going to do it this way, the most important part is I'm going to do most of these things. I'm going to do social media. I'm going to go through and make sure it's on the company website. I'm going to do a 3D walkthrough. Like this is your game plan for beating out your competition. So again, same thing here. Have a great consult, use a great listing presentation, really get good at that. Explain the disadvantages and advantages of offering compensation or buyer concessions. You do need to do that. Do not steer them. Give them their options. Let them make their choice. It's part of your fiduciary responsibility. Get good at articulating your value extensively, and then make sure the buyer, go through what the buyer's looking for in this search experience. So again, talk about what you do. You've seen this kind of slide before, and we'll circulate this deck so you guys can have a copy of it. Explain what your services are to cover those things, the 8 things that the seller's looking for. But what you want to do here is really focus on this. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is what buyers are looking for in the search experience. So I want to explain to you how I'm going to address that, to give you as many eyeballs with as many offers to get you the best price. So professional photos is what buyers want. We're going to do that. They're looking for detailed information on homes for sale. We're going to get it in the MLS because it's an important part of our marketing. And we're also going to provide them real reports, which is kind of like the homeowner, the Carfax for your house. We're going to do a floor plan through Kubicasa. We're going to give them detailed information on sold properties for available. That's basically through the MLS. I use a product called Local Logic to do neighborhood information. I'm going to not only do a 3D home tour on Zillow because that gets you higher placement, but I'm going to do one on Matterport as well that we can circulate around the internet. Again, pending home and contract stuff. Again, that's MLS. I have a website that does interactive map search. We're going to do a professional video on YouTube. This doesn't need to be professionally done. You guys have all the equipment in the world to make this easy to do, or hire a professional. I don't care. But we're also going to do 4 open houses to get as many eyeballs in here as possible. And we're going to publish that. And then if a buyer is interested in seeing the property live, I personally will do a FaceTime with them. I have now addressed everything the buyer wants. I've addressed what my competition doesn't do, and I've laid out an incredibly valuable proposition. Again, also some things that we do differently, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is we're going to give variations of photos. So I'm going to do, and you need to check with your MLS on this, but we're going to do the real photos, and then I'm going to show AI-driven photos, which will watermark AI-driven, which is what the house can look like. Don't take offense to it, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Everybody has their own look. We want to give them the ability to see what the house could potentially be if they owned it. We're also going to give them an idea of what a potential remodel might look like. Again, we're going to showcase on Zillow. It could be Realtor. You pick your flavor. We'll help you do move all your utilities, you move concierge, and we're going to do social media ads. Again, I am annihilating my competition in this presentation. And then again, final comment, monetize it. I'm not asking you to eat all of this in your compensation. I'm simply stating, figure out a way to offer your basic services and then offer a premium and then throw whatever you want into that. Again, sellers will pay a premium for convenience and service. All right. How would you go get pro photos of someone else's listing? You need to talk to the brokerage, obviously. Like, I don't want to get into copyright issues with that. I think you can very easily do it by calling the listing agent and saying, look, I have a buyer that's interested in this property. Do you mind if I get some of the photos of the home and I show them what it might look like if it was remodeled? I have an AI system that does that. It might get the buyer to move off the fence. Most listing agents will work with you on that if you just ask permission. So that's how I would address that. All right, let's talk about Raise. This is exciting time. This is a product that's been in development for 2 years. Yes, I am a co-founder in the company, but I'm also in the industry, as you all know. Like, I'm literally in the business helping 6,000 agents helping buyers and sellers across the US with real estate. So I've been in this business my entire life. What you are looking at right now is going to be the future of the industry. It's not a matter whether it's Raise. There are other companies now that are trying to copy what Raise is doing. You will be doing a form of this. It's simply a matter of when and how you take advantage of this. So let's address the biggest issues and why Raise was formed. This study that we did last year was actually horrific. It freaked me out, and it should freak you out too. Fundamentally, we have a huge problem between perception and reality. Perception is 46% of buyers think you spend less than 15 hours to help them purchase a home. The reality is it's actually 87 hours. We'll get into that in just a second. But what's happening post August 17th is buy-side compensation is coming down. And understandably, it would, because we haven't had to do things the same way we're doing them now. Like, we haven't really had to do consults. We didn't really spend the time the same way we did with sellers to address needs and really get to know what they're looking for. We're going to solve this, and it's going to get solved in really interesting ways like Raise, but you should be concerned. And with the pressure that's coming from these acquisitions by like Rocket with Redfin, et cetera, you're going to see more pressure on compensation than you've ever seen in your history of being in this business. So you have to be thinking about now, not, oh, I'll worry about this in 6 months. You've got to be thinking about now how to get really good at explaining what you do so people are willing to pay you the fee you request, or you will be part of a statistic where compensation will continue to come down. There are 3 problems that we have to address as an industry. Consumers don't understand what we do. They don't get it. They think we literally just open a door, show a house, write a contract, and get paid an enormous amount of money. That's what they think. They just like, yeah, I can find the house online. Why am I paying you to do that? And then why the hell should I pay you that much? Standard responses we got from all the surveys we've done with buyers and sellers. The other thing you have to consider is this: we're in a very new world. You are all used to being able to order a car. It tells you when the cars are going to arrive. It'll tell you what the car is. It'll tell you how long your drive time will be, how many stops in between. It's just all interactive. Everything, we live in an interactive world. You can do it with Amazon, you can do it with DoorDash. Real estate couldn't be further from that. It's the most behind the curtain industry possible. And until we fix that, we're going to have a lot of people who question what our value is. This is an average real estate transaction on the buy side. Literally, we mapped it. The standard transaction in the US when representing a buyer looks something like this. And on average, it takes about 56 days, about 87 hours worth of work. There's about 114 activities and about 202 outcomes. Here's the point. I'm going to make this like really cement. When you show a buyer a property and you spend 30 minutes with them at the home, the only thing they valued was the 30 minutes because they only see the 30 minutes that you were with them. What they didn't think about was the 20 minutes you were in the car driving to the appointment, the 20-minute phone call you had prior to that to both arrange the appointment or you called the listing agent to have a conversation. You had the 30-minute walkthrough. Then you guys chatted for a bit. Then you went and drove back to your office, called the listing agent, got more information, got a copy of the disclosures. You read the disclosures for 2.5 hours. You write an email to the buyer with everything in it. And then the buyer goes, yeah, I'm not interested. And you just spent 3.5 to 4.5 hours worth of work. They don't see the 3.5, they only saw the hour. If we don't get transparent with what we do, people will only value the small segment that they see. It's fundamentally what I'm talking about. So what you have to do is you got to fix this disconnect. You got to bring the perception and reality together. And that's what Raise is literally all about. So your expertise, you make it look effortless to them. The problem is that you need to make those efforts appear. And so we built this really sophisticated technology that tracks the things that you do. And it exposes those things in a really fun way to the buyer so they can see all the work that you're doing and they go, damn, my agent's a rock star. Like, I didn't realize they were doing all of this work. And what it does is it changes the entire impression. It not only changes the way that they think about you, but it also changes the way that they value you during the transaction and afterwards. And we do this through a lot of different pieces of automation. So the phone, your phone right now has been for like 10 years now, tracking where you're moving. We use the same technology your mapping software uses. We can see that you're at your house because latitude and longitude of your phone tells us that. We can see you're at a listing because we pull the latitude and longitude and cross-reference it against the MLS data and go, oh, you're at an active listing in the MLS. We use integration with a company called Radar to see your location. We can see you stopped at Starbucks for 25 minutes. And we'll be like, hey, did you have a meeting with a client? You're like, yeah, I had coffee with them. So like, we're doing really cool things to track the things that you already do and expose it in a really unique way for the client to appreciate your value. And that's what Raise is fundamentally all about. It's helping people see your value at every stage of the buying and selling process. We do this through a variety of different products. So we have this really gorgeous presentation that we've built. I don't have time to go through it today. It would be a separate thing. And I would encourage you to go talk to the team and see it. It's this gorgeous digital presentation that literally lays out in detail, if you want to, the 180 things that are going to cover. The buyer walks away from the presentation with a completely different impression of how complicated the transaction is and the work that's involved, which is what you're trying to accomplish. And that's done through showing them these specific milestones and every outcome that's going to occur in each stage of this transaction. So that's the first part. The second part is an app that the client downloads and interfaces with you. So as you're doing things, it's showing them where they are in the process and what's coming next. And more importantly, it's reiterating to them all the damn work that you've been doing so that you've shown them 10 houses and you haven't even gotten to the point of getting an accepted offer and you've already accomplished all these things. So they're like, wow, I totally forgot about it. That point I just made is really important too. Every house you show them, they forget about a week later. And so this system's designed to show them every house that you're going to show them, ones you've written offers on, and all the homes that they've rejected. But all of this data that's collected around those activities becomes part of this cumulative process. We celebrate moments with the client. So as they achieve milestones, we gamify it. So congrats, your offer was accepted. Here's what's happening next. Again, we give them weekly updates on where we are, both what's occurred, what's coming next in the process. So it's a very collaborative experience with the client. It's changing the entire thing. And then finally, there's this beautiful closing report. This is an entire outline of every single detail about what's happened, how many hours you worked. You can toggle that on and off. You literally be tracked down to the mileage you've got, which again, you can show or not show, but everything that the client went through is into this digital experience. And so we also do that in a PDF experience that you can print and show the buyer everything that you've done for them. Again, laying out all of these details so that they appreciate the work that was done. This report that's created for you is something that you can email them, and it will literally list out in detail like the 200 things that you've done in that particular process. And so this is a very, very beautiful process of getting them to appreciate what you do up front to get the fee you think you're worth. Then you're going to create a collaborative experience with them through automation. By the way, almost all of this is automated. We're talking literally 1 minute a day worth of work. That's it. That's all it requires you to do. A minute. And so it's this beautiful experience. And then you end the experience with all the work I did. By the way, the most important part I'll tell you here, the agents that are using this across the country, they've told me that they love the closing report. It's actually really interesting. They send it to the buyer, but they don't really talk about it. It's just kind of like, hey, just wanted to send you a recap of our experience working together. But what they do get excited about is they take the same closing report from their past client and they're bringing it with them on their next buyer consult. So they're going to the next buyer when they're doing a buyer presentation to get them to work with them. They use the buyer presentation I just showed you. And again, you can go more details on that, but they bring a previous closing report to go, here's the work that was involved with the last client that I just did a deal with. And it helps the buyer understand the complexity of the transaction. So again, some really cool things. The whole system has got this really cool back end. It's such an easy system to use. It was designed around making it as convenient as possible for everybody. And I'll leave you with these 2 comments. So this is the part I really want to sink in here. These are some testimonials that we've had from some agents. I tracked showings, text, phone calls, offers, written communication with buyers, lenders, insurance agents, title companies, wrote 2 unsuccessful offers, and they ended up buying through my friend's father's agent, spent 30 hours working with them. I'm sure all of you can relate to this in some experience, but if you put time to the work that you do, you'll start to rethink how you value your services. The agent had never tracked any of this before until we started showing them all of this stuff. And then they're realizing, man, I got to rethink how I work with my clients because I can't spend 30 hours with somebody without some type of commitment. And so that's one as an example. This one I think is most interesting as out of all of them. And that is really about this. 29.6 hours spent so far. And I anticipate spending potentially 2 to 3 times additional hours before getting them to contract. And then there will be the addition of the post-acceptance to closing time spent as well. This buyer's been in the market on and off for their first home for 3 to 4 years. Just going to leave it right there for a second. I know many of you have clients you've worked with where you've been doing it for years. And I would encourage you to rethink a lot of stuff in this future. You're going to have a conversation about what your time is worth. You can't spend 2 to 3 years working with somebody and spending 30 hours and then, potentially 2 to 3 times that. And you're going, at some point, this doesn't make sense. Or at some point or some number, it doesn't make sense. I had a call with an agent who told me he has shown 37 homes to a buyer over 2 years. And I was like, what in the hell are you doing? Like, you need to fire your clients. Like, there's a point where it doesn't make any sense because you do have to provide for your family. This whole system is going to change everything for everybody. And the faster you think about adopting a system like this, you're going to be rethinking how your business operates. You're going to be rethinking how you approach conversations with buyers and sellers, articulating your value with confidence. And also, I think you'll find that they'll appreciate what you do more. So consider all of that. I'll leave you with these 2 things and I'll answer any additional questions while I still have 5 minutes. On the left is my podcast. Would love for you to subscribe. If you haven't listened to it, we do have a good time there. It's a lot of fun, really interesting executives and people from across the real estate industry we interview. So I think you'll very much enjoy that. It's become a very popular podcast. And then I would encourage all of you to at least scan the Raise QR code. Scroll down to the bottom and put your name in and then talk to one of our people and just do a demo of the product. Look at it. fully white labeled. They can show you how it's set up. They can show you the entire process. They'll demo the buyer presentation for you, which is totally badass. So think about that. And with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them for the last 5 minutes that I have. Any questions in the Q&A?
James, is there anything you can address based on cost of the raised product? I know that a bunch of our folks were curious about that.
Yeah, so the reason I don't have it in there is because it varies based upon how you set it up, whether it's through your company or it's elsewhere, and then it's also based upon the number of users. So without me going through this massive chart of stuff, it's honestly just easier. But I'll leave you with this. There's two options. You can pay a per closed transaction fee on average around 75 bucks. What that means is you don't pay for the product monthly, you get to use it. You only pay on a deal you close. And then there are options for seat licenses where, the average, 20 bucks a month sort of thing. So there are options that you have to work through with the sales team. They'll figure that out for you. So yeah. Can we get a copy of this recording? I believe they are going to send it around. And I will also circulate the deck. So I'll give it to Amy and then she can circulate that for those of you who want to go back to the slides. You're welcome to use them. And if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me as well. My email is just james@nexthome.com. It's really simple. So
thank you again, James, so much for this informative webinar. As a reminder, if you're a broker looking to get raised for your office or to discuss the cost, visit raise.com/LIBOR to get started. And if you missed anything on today's webinar, if you would like to listen again, we'll be posting the replay shortly on lirealtor.com/webinars. We'll also place the deck there as well. And then be sure to check back there, and then you can also sign up for upcoming webinars there as well. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.